The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of Sarah Thompson's modest ranch-style home in Willow Creek, Ohio, casting delicate shadows across the worn linoleum floor. But wait, if you don't subscribe a channel, then you must subscribe and watch full video. Twist was on the ENG of the story. It was Mother's Day, May 14, 2025, and Sarah, now 52, stood at her kitchen counter, stirring cream into her coffee. The aroma mingled with the faint scent of lavender from a candle she'd lit to mark the occasion. For years, this holiday had been a quiet ritual of solitude. Her only child, Ethan, hadn't called since he left for Stanford a decade ago. His departure sealed by a bitter argument that still echoed in her mind. Sarah had raised him alone, working double shifts at the local diner, pouring every penny into his future. Now, at 30, Ethan was a tech mogul, a Silicon Valley star whose face graced Forbes covers but never her doorstep. She sipped her coffee, her fingers tracing the edge of a chipped mug, and let memories of his childhood, crayon-drawn cards, clumsy hugs, fill the silence. The doorbell rang, sharp and jarring, slicing through the morning calm. Sarah's heart lurched. No one visited her anymore. Not neighbors, not friends, not even the mailman on Sundays. She smoothed her faded cardigan, her hands trembling, and shuffled to the door, her slippers scuffing the hardwood. Peering through the peephole, she froze. There stood Ethan, tall and imposing in a tailored navy suit. His dark hair slicked back, his eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. Her breath caught, a mix of hope and dread flooding her chest. She opened the door, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan." "Happy Mother's Day, Mom," he said. His voice low, almost rehearsed, carrying a weight she couldn't place. Before she could respond, he stepped forward, enveloping her in a hug. His arms were strong, unfamiliar, the scent of his expensive cologne overwhelming the lavender. His breath grazed her ear as he whispered, "I know what you did." The words hit like a thunderbolt, cold and sharp, twisting deep in her gut. Sarah's knees buckled, her mind racing to the night 12 years ago when Ethan's father, James, died. She'd told Ethan he'd left them, but the truth was a shadow she'd buried. What did Ethan know? Why had he come back now, after all these years of silence? Her hands gripped his arms, searching his face for answers, but his expression was unreadable, a mask of calm that hid something darker. Was he here to reconnect, or to settle a score? What secret is Ethan hinting at? Is his return a gesture of love or a prelude to revenge? Sarah stumbled back, her hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter as Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "I know what you did." The weight of them pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. His hug had lingered, tight and almost possessive, before he released her and stepped fully into the house. The scent of his cologne, crisp, expensive like cedar and wealth, clashed with the homely lavender of her candle. Ethan removed his sunglasses, revealing hazel eyes that mirrored her own but burned with something new. Accusation, perhaps, or betrayal. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her fingers digging into the counter's chipped edge. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he set a small velvet box on the oak dining table, its surface scarred from years of family dinners. Meals when Ethan was a boy, laughing over mac and cheese before everything fell apart. "Open it," he said, his tone flat but commanding, like a CEO issuing an order. Sarah's hands trembled as she lifted the lid, revealing a tarnished silver locket engraved with her initials. Her breath caught, sharp and painful. She hadn't seen it since the night Ethan's father, James, disappeared 12 years ago. It was a gift from him, given in a rare moment of tenderness, before his drinking and debts consumed him. "Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice shaking as memories flooded back. A stormy night, James's slurred shouts, the sickening thud of his fall. Ethan's lips curled into a thin, almost cruel smile. "Money buys answers, Mom," he said, leaning against the counter, his Rolex glinting in the morning light. "Private investigators, old records. Secrets don't stay hidden forever." His words were a punch, each one landing harder than the last. Sarah's mind spiraled to that night. Rain pounding the roof, James's rage, her desperate push to protect herself. She'd told Ethan his father had left them, a lie to shield him from the truth, that James had died in their home and she'd covered it up. Had Ethan's wealth uncovered the police reports? The neighbors' whispers? She clutched the locket, its cold metal grounding her as panic rose. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked, her voice breaking. He studied her, his expression unreadable, then poured himself a coffee from her chipped pot, moving with a deliberateness that unnerved her. "I want the truth," he said finally, his voice low. "But first, I want you to remember what you've done." The words hung in the air, heavy with menace. Sarah's eyes darted to the locket, then to Ethan's face, searching for the boy she'd raised. But the man before her was a stranger. His wealth and distance a wall between them. Was this a game, or had he come for revenge? Sarah's fingers tightened around the locket, its edges biting into her palm as memories flooded back, vivid, unrelenting, like a movie she couldn't pause. She could still hear the storm that night, the rain hammering the roof of their old house, James's voice slurring with whiskey and rage. The fight had started over money, as it always did. His gambling debts, her meager paycheck, but it ended in a moment that changed everything. She'd pushed him just to get away, and he'd fallen down the stairs, his body crumpling at the bottom. It was an accident, but the guilt had consumed her for 12 years. She'd told Ethan his father had abandoned them, a lie to protect him from the truth. Now Ethan stood in her kitchen, his polished shoes clicking on the linoleum, his presence a storm cloud in her quiet life. "You thought I'd never find out," Ethan said, sipping his coffee. His movements deliberate, almost theatrical, as if he'd rehearsed this confrontation. His suit, tailored and crisp, made the room feel shabbier, the peeling wallpaper a stark contrast to his wealth. "I found the police report, Mom," he continued. his voice steady but laced with pain. And something else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter, its paper yellowed and creased, like something pulled from a time capsule. Sarah's heart stopped. She recognized her own handwriting. Desperate, scrawled in the days after James's death, when fear and guilt had kept her awake. "You wrote to Uncle Mark," Ethan said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You said you were scared someone saw you that night." Sarah's mouth went dry. She'd written that letter to James's brother, confessing her fear that a neighbor or passerby had witnessed the fight through the window. She'd burned it, or thought she had, pouring her heart out in a moment of weakness before destroying the evidence. How had Ethan found it? "I was protecting you," she said, her voice breaking as tears welled. "Your father was dangerous. I couldn't let you know what happened." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with hurt. "You let me hate him," he said. "I spent years thinking he didn't want me." Sarah sank into a chair, the locket heavy in her hand. The police had ruled James's death an accident, believing her story of a drunken fall, but the fear of exposure had never left her. Now, Ethan's words suggested he'd uncovered more than she'd ever imagined. Had his investigators found witnesses, records, or was he bluffing, testing her? The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second amplifying the tension. Ethan set the letter on the table, his gaze never leaving her. "There's more, isn't there?" he asked, his voice low. "What else are you hiding? What does the letter reveal? Is someone else watching Sarah?" The kitchen felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with tension as Sarah stared at the letter on the table. Her handwriting stared back at her, a ghost from a past she'd tried to bury. "I was protecting you," she repeated, her voice trembling as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Your father was troubled, Ethan. I couldn't let you grow up knowing the truth." Ethan's jaw tightened, his hazel eyes flashing with a mix of anger and pain. "You let me believe he abandoned us," he said, his voice raw. "I spent my whole life hating him, thinking I wasn't enough. And now I find out it was a lie." He unfolded the letter, his hands steady despite the emotion in his voice, and read aloud. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was an accident, Mark. But I'm scared someone knows." Sarah's heart pounded as the words filled the room, each one a weight pressing her down. She'd written that letter in a haze of grief and fear, convinced someone had seen her on the porch that night, calling 911 as rain soaked her clothes. The police had believed her story, a drunken fall, an accident, but the paranoia had lingered, a shadow she couldn't shake. "I burned that letter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's lips curled into a thin smile. "Not well enough," he said. "My investigators found it in Uncle Mark's attic, tucked away with Dad's old things." Her mind reeled. Mark had died years ago, and she'd assumed the letter was gone forever. How had Ethan's team found it? And what else had they uncovered? Ethan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "There's another letter, Mom. That he wrote to someone named V, saying you knew about a debt you both owed." Sarah's blood ran cold. James had been deep in gambling debts, tangled with dangerous people, loan sharks, maybe worse. She'd known about the money he owed but never the details. After his death, she'd searched for his hidden cash, hoping to pay off his debts, but found nothing. Had Ethan stumbled into something bigger, something that could destroy them both? She looked at him, searching for the boy she'd raised, but saw only a man hardened by years of distance and success. His wealth had given him power, but at what cost? "Ethan, I don't know about any debt," she said, her voice shaking. "I swear." He studied her, his expression unreadable, then set his coffee mug down with a deliberate clink. "Then we have a problem," he said. "Because someone out there thinks you do. Who is V? What debt is tied to Sarah's past?" The kitchen felt smaller, the walls closing in as Ethan's words hung in the air. "Someone out there thinks you do." Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might burst. A witness. A debt. The pieces of her past were unraveling, and Ethan's presence was pulling the threads. "I hired investigators," he said, pacing the linoleum, his polished shoes echoing in the quiet house. "They found a witness, Mom. Someone saw you that night, outside after Dad fell." Sarah's breath caught, her mind flashing to the porch, rain soaking her clothes as she dialed 911, her hands shaking. Had someone been there, hidden in the shadows of Willow Creek's quiet streets? "Who was it?" she asked, her voice barely audible, fear tightening her throat. Ethan shook his head, his expression a mix of frustration and something deeper. Concern, maybe. "They didn't say. But they're connected to V. And they're not done with you." He pulled out his phone, swiping to a grainy photo. A figure in a hooded jacket, standing across the street from their old house, partially obscured by rain. Sarah's stomach churned. She'd always felt watched after James's death. A prickle on the back of her neck she dismissed as paranoia. Now, Ethan's wealth and resources had confirmed her worst fears. "Ethan, I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "Why are you doing this?" He stopped pacing, his eyes softening for the first time. "I'm not here to hurt you, Mom," he said, his voice low. "I came to warn you. But I need the whole truth. What else are you hiding?" Sarah clutched the locket, its weight a reminder of her choices. She hadn't told him everything. Not about James's ties to dangerous people. Not about the threats that had followed her even after his death. She'd thought the past was buried, but Ethan's return had unearthed it, and now someone was watching, waiting. Her eyes darted to the window, where the morning light was fading into gray. Was the witness out there now? Or was V closer than she thought? Ethan sat across from her, his gaze steady. "We're in this together," he said, but his tone carried a warning. "But you need to tell me everything before it's too late." Sarah's mind raced, piecing together fragments of that night. The debts, the secrets. She had to protect Ethan, but at what cost? Who is the witness? Is Sarah in danger? Or is Ethan playing a game? Sarah took a shaky breath, the weight of 12 years pressing down on her like a physical force. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second amplifying the tension between her and Ethan. "Your father wasn't just a drunk," she said finally, her voice trembling. "He was in deep with some bad people. Gambling debts, shady deals. He owed money to someone powerful." Ethan's eyes widened, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. She told him about the night James died. His slurred threats, the knife he'd pulled in a fit of rage, the moment she pushed him to escape. "I didn't mean to kill him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared for you." Ethan sank into a chair, his face pale, his hands clenched. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice raw with pain. "I thought he left because I wasn't good enough." Sarah's heart broke at his words. She reached for his hand, but he pulled back, the hurt in his eyes cutting deeper than any accusation. "I was trying to protect you," she said. "You were just a kid." Ethan shook his head, his jaw tight. "I deserved to know." He pulled another letter from his pocket. James's, addressed to V. It read, "Sarah knows where the money is. If she doesn't pay, she'll pay in other ways." Sarah's blood ran cold. James had been involved in a local crime ring, borrowing money from loan sharks to fuel his gambling addiction. He'd hidden cash somewhere, promising to pay it back, but after his death, Sarah had searched their house and found nothing. Had V been waiting all these years, believing she had the money? Ethan's voice broke through her thoughts. "My investigators think V is still out there," he said. "And they're not just after money. They're after revenge." Sarah's mind reeled. She remembered James's late-night calls, his nervous glances out the window. Had V been watching her even then? She looked at Ethan, his face a mix of determination and fear. "What do we do?" she asked. He leaned forward, his voice low. "We find the truth together. But you need to tell me everything. What is the money James hid? Is this still after Sarah?" Ethan's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. "Someone's been blackmailing me," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They have Dad's letter, the police report, and a witness's statement. They want $2 million, or they'll go public." Sarah's heart sank. She'd spent years rebuilding her life, working double shifts at the diner, living paycheck to paycheck. She had nothing close to that kind of money. Ethan with his tech empire could pay. But at what cost? "I came to warn you," he said, his eyes searching hers. "But I need the truth. Do you know where Dad's money is?" Sarah's mind raced to the old safe in James's office, locked away in a storage unit on the edge of Willow Creek. She'd never opened it, too afraid of what she might find. Proof of James's crimes, or worse, something that could implicate her. "There's a safe," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I don't know what's in it." Ethan nodded, his jaw set. "Then we find it. Tonight." They gathered their coats, the tension between them palpable. As they stepped outside, Sarah noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its driver obscured by tinted windows. Her heart skipped. Was it the witness, or just a neighbor? The drive to the storage unit was silent, the Ohio countryside blurring past in the dusk. Sarah's mind churned with memories. James's promises to change, his apologies, the fear that had defined their marriage. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. "I didn't come back to hurt you," he said suddenly. "I came because you're my mom." The words were a lifeline, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Whoever it was, they'd been watching, waiting. And now Ethan's return had set everything in motion. What's in the safe? Can Sarah and Ethan outsmart the blackmailer? The storage unit was a time capsule, its air thick with dust and memories. Boxes of Ethan's childhood toys, baseballs, comic books, sat beside James's old jackets, their leather cracked with age. The safe, rusted but intact, stood in the corner. Sarah's hands shook as she knelt before it, entering the combination. Ethan's birth date, a detail James had chosen in a rare moment of sentiment. The door creaked open, revealing $200,000 in cash, a stack of bearer bonds, and a note in James's handwriting. "For V. Tell Sarah I'm sorry." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. James had loved her in his flawed, broken way, and now his mistakes were hers to face. Ethan hugged her tightly, his voice soft. "I didn't come to hurt you, Mom. I came to protect you." Through his investigators, he'd learned V was Victor Malone, James's old partner, now a small-time crook in Cleveland. Victor had been blackmailing Ethan, threatening to expose Sarah's role in James's death unless he paid. Ethan devised a plan. They'd lure Victor to a meeting, record his confession, and turn him over to the police. They set the trap in a diner parking lot, the cash as bait. Victor, greedy and overconfident, admitted everything. His role in James's debts, his threats against Sarah. As police lights flashed, Sarah and Ethan stood together, the locket in her hand. Back on her porch under the Ohio stars, Ethan whispered, "We're a family. No more secrets." Mother's Day had brought them back together, their bond stronger than ever. But as they watched the police take Victor away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was still out there, watching. Will Victor stay behind bars? Can Sarah and Ethan rebuild their trust?